right, let's go ahead and check in on Hurricane Lee as the Category 4 storm continues to move towards the Caribbean. We have to emphasize again that it is too soon to say how this could impact the U.S. East Coast, particularly, when we'll see it steer to the north, because right now, notice it does have a predominantly westward movement to it. So we're going to continue to watch it and track it out, especially for the eastern seaboard. Let's take a look at the latest stats right now. Again, a Category 4 hurricane. We got that update from the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Pressure has continued to drop all the way down to 953 millibars, and you're seeing those maximum sustained winds at 130 miles per hour. Very clearly defined eye, very intense and large hurricane that we are watching coming out of the tropical Atlantic. So here's a look at the forecast track. Not much of a change in it, but we are expected to continue to see it strengthen as it pushes west-northwest of the islands there. And all of this coming just a week after Hurricane Idalia made landfall in Florida. Fox Weather's Britta Merwin and Bob Van Dillen were on the ground covering the storm as it hit. And earlier today on Weather Command, they shared their experiences.
Since it was paralleling the coast of Florida, you really didn't know exactly where it was going to bend in, where we should be located. So we went to Tampa, and you did too, and you went up to the Big Bend area afterwards, right?
Yeah, I pretty much kind of trailed the whole storm. So started in Tampa. For landfall day, I was in Gainesville. And, after the window closed for Gainesville to feel the brunt of what they were going to feel, we started chasing the eye. And that's when we started seeing the wind impact. And, once we got to landfall site, which was actually the day after landfall, I was shocked by what I found in Keaton Beach because, shockingly, it looked okay.
Really?
I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a ton of cleanup. They had 7-foot storm surge in the area. They had 83-mile-per-hour winds. But go back to what the storm was. This was a Cat 4, 20 miles off the coast, and made landfall as a Cat 3. For a landfall of a Cat 3 to have peak wind gusts at 83 miles per hour, it would make you scratch your head until you look into what happened. And, backing up the radar, it's clear as day what happened. It was going through an eye wall replacement.
Well, we have Hurricane Lee. That's forecast to become a Category 5.
It fell apart while it was making landfall, and that was a
we don't know where it's going to go yet.
What we saw in Perry, that's where we saw these winds from this. It's almost like a tornado rolled through. Imagine having that widespread across the Big Bend, because that's what we could have seen if we didn't see that eye wall replacement.
Yeah, it really was the break in the storm.
And it was interesting, too. I was sleeping on how much rain actually fell. I was in Clearwater Beach, and I was getting pounded for most of the evening into the overnight hours. And then I looked at the rainfall totals. Clearwater Beach almost picked up 9.5 inches of rain. So we had some freshwater flooding going on as well as that storm surge that came up. There's a video of the storm surge right here. That was
far away
just
from
starting.
me.
It actually got a little bit worse. Got up to about 4 feet, which covered the entire street right there. It was Gulfview Boulevard, and then it went out through Coronado Drive, which is right next to it, parallels the beach. Our hotel was an island for a good
I went
6
down
to 8
there
hours.
after
It wasn't that deep. It was
after the
about
hurricane
maybe a
went
foot
by.
at the most, but it was still in there. That 4
Some
foot
of the
surge.
areas were still
Imagine if
flooded.
the storm was closer inland and it was stronger. You can imagine how vulnerable this area is when it comes to storm surge. And that was kind of just a weak storm surge if you look at it, 4 feet, but look what it did.
Right, and I think this is a wake-up call and a reminder at the same time for people who have not seen a storm come through the Big Bend, and also those who've moved to Florida because there's been such an influx of population, to see both water damage and wind damage that can come out of a storm like this.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example for folks that don't live in Florida, because Florida knows how to deal with tropical systems.
Yeah, we
see it in their
do.
building codes. I mean, in Keaton Beach, I've never seen homes that are built up that high.
Well,
I mean,
18 to 20 feet off the ground.
higher than that.
We
in Keaton
definitely
Beach, though. I
know.
was shocked. They had some pilings that were 25 feet tall.
Wow.
And we looked into the building codes. The building code is they need 36 feet from the bottom to the top of their home. And the reason why is because the storm of the century in 1993. So although the Big Bend of Florida has not been impacted by a hurricane in over, 100 years, March of 1993, a non-tropical system brought in a 7-foot storm surge for places like Keaton Beach and Cedar Key, and it changed the building codes. And also it changed how people act. I didn't find one resident in Keaton Beach that stayed behind. All of them left.
It's good.
And all of them, when they came back, they were so thankful that they had a home that needed repair and a lot of cleanup. you know, there was only a handful of structures that, quite honestly, were going to be a rebuild. But considering that this is a Cat 3, you know, the fact that we're talking about a handful of people that are doing a rebuild and the majority of people doing a massive cleanup and a massive repair job is, you know, that's a huge thing to be thankful for.
It's also amazing that that 93 storm, it turned into a nor'easter. And I remember I was playing hockey in Johnstown, got snowed in there for a couple extra days. Everyone in the Northeast
knows that storm.
Yeah, so it doesn't take a hurricane just to get a storm surge. You can have any kind of storm that does it. But that nor'easter was so powerful, and it did more damage to Clearwater Beach than this storm did right now, which because they built up. They put dunes out there, which is good.
Yeah, well, terrific coverage, you guys. It was an iconic storm to be a part of, and also a learning opportunity for both sides, both our teams and also people living on this coastline to see what a storm like this can do. And in a unique hurricane season at that. So great job to everyone.
Not hurricane, that would be my...
And now we're going to be talking about Perry, Florida, which was in the direct path of Hurricane Idalia. It took that western eye wall, and a local gym was badly damaged when the storm hit.
Joining us now is the owner of Concur Fitness Gym in Perry. We have Dustin Whitten and
was my first hurricane to
We
go
appreciate you
through.
both joining us. And I love the name of the gym, Concur, H-E-R.
Now we got knees.
Female empowerment. I'm digging it. But we are just so sorry for everything you've had to deal with. I want to talk about your business, how you've been able to recover and move forward in the wake of Idalia, and really what you suffered as a result of the storm.
Yeah, well.
Oh, come on.
Well, thank you for having us to talk to you all. And I'll be honest, we're still kind of processing some of the damage, and we're still kind of mitigating it. I don't know that we're 100% in recovery mode yet, but you know, we're definitely working that way. We've got a lot of people on the ground here helping us, a lot of resources here helping us, but the community really has banded together and kind of circled around the people that need the help. And so it's been a really cool thing to witness firsthand.
And Dustin, we saw that your gym, Concur Fitness, suffered that major damage to the structure and contents inside, and that included the second floor, which you plan to live in. And I think your backstory is amazing as well. You actually built the gym. So can you kind of describe the damage that you've seen? And is this something that you feel confident that you can repair?
I left my job a few years ago and I bought the building. It's a historic building in my hometown, and it really spoke to me. It's an awesome piece of the community here, and fitness has always been a passion of mine. And I felt confident in being able to run a gym and have a nice low cost option as a gym here in my hometown. And so as we go forward trying to rebuild, I feel like I'm confident to some degree, but it was already an ambitious undertaking, and it definitely is now. So I do feel confident that we will get there. We'll get back up and running, but I would be lying if I said that this wasn't a setback.
Well, and I want to ask too, because we were told that the gym opened in 2019. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, you opened in 2019, the pandemic hits. So now you have that challenge, you reopen, things are getting back on track, and now you have to deal with the hurricane. I mean, this must be incredibly frustrating when you want to be there for your community and provide business and employment and an area for fun, and then you have to go through all of this.
Sure. Maybe a slight amendment on the dates, but I purchased the building in 2019, and then I actually became the gym's landlord. And then when COVID closed it down, I purchased the gym, and I just started growing it aggressively. I felt that I was capable to do that, and you know, it's something I'm passionate about. And so my office manager Amanda here, we started aggressively trying to grow it, and we've got amazing members, and we've been very fortunate. And we've been growing the gym steadily ever since. So so the gym date was February 1st of 2021.
Amazing what you were able to accomplish. And we believe you're going to bounce on your feet, as you had mentioned. And we're running short on time. We apologize. Marine veteran and owner Dustin Whitten and office manager Amanda Gaddis of Concur Fitness in Perry, Florida. Thank you so much for sharing your story here on Fox Weather.
Thank you both.
Yeah, best of luck moving forward. We do want to get back to some of the forecasts, so we're going to take it back into the Midwest. We have to Milwaukee, some of the clouds overhead. Big change from yesterday, Milwaukee. You were baking in the heat and the humidity. Then some storms went through. The cold front went through. Now you got a little taste of fall. So some changes for you. Green Bay, Wisconsin, Labor Day. You were sitting at 91 degrees. Today, 63. You averaged 75. So, yeah, it's a little refreshing. So that cold front doing some folks a big favor, bringing down some of the temperatures, maybe bringing you back down to seasonable. And you'll notice for tomorrow, we're also looking at some temperatures in the 70s and 80s. But, I mean, looking at Detroit, 69 degrees. Same with Chicago. You're feeling a little bit cooler. Traverse City, you also have some nice temperatures on the way.
And so we're going to be talking about those changes here stateside and also what's happening in the tropics. Make sure you stay with us here for Fox Weather.
Right now on Fox Weather Live, we are tracking Hurricane Lee. The now Category 4 hurricane, it is still expected to pick up strength as it continues to move toward the Caribbean. Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ, and we are keeping a close watch on how Lee could impact the U.S. East Coast.
And speaking of the East Coast, we've got a September heat wave going on right now. Relief is on the way, but so are rounds of storms. That's going to be the trade-off. We'll talk about those spots that are being impacted.
All right. Hey there, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Marissa Torres.
And I'm Steve Bender. Thank you for watching Fox Weather on your Thursday evening. And if you haven't joined us since yesterday evening, there is a lot that has changed in the tropics.
You know, it's so interesting. I mean, you know, the interest and obviously the concern watching what's happening in the tropics. And then you also look about the here and now and everybody baking in the heat. Yeah. You know, it's so interesting. We had our first day of school today, and it was already in the 80s by 8 o'clock today. So the heat has been the other big issue at hand. But yes, we can't ignore what's going on in the Atlantic.
It's good that you bring that up because 80s, that's what the air temperature was. Feels like it was getting close to 90 already because I was getting out to walk the dog. Yeah, I saw the kids going to school, and I was like, I can't imagine. You're already sweating on the way to school.
It's been hot here too,
dude. Little kids, though. Now they got to sit at a desk for hours while you're just dripping all over. We're going to address when the cool down will take hold. When is Hurricane Lee going to cool down? Man, let's take some of this. It is just warming up. It is intensifying, and it is just feeding off of the Atlantic right now. And notice this. It's a Cat 4, powerful, major hurricane right now. When you're looking at satellite imagery, by the way, notice how well-balanced this is. You have a well-defined eye, that core is solid. You have an outflow boundary. It looks like a buzzsaw. And when you're looking at this, there's no indication that it's going to weaken. That's why over the next 24, 36 hours, we're looking at a Cat 5 storm, and they've actually increased the wind potential on the top end of this, and it could even get greater than that. We'll talk about it in just a moment. Here is the pressure millibar drop.
Winds could be up to 165 miles per hour.
That I know we categorize these storms by the wind, right? It's at 130, so that puts it at a Cat 4. But pressure dropping, there's research that says that the intensity is actually driven by this, and you can find what kind of impact and intensity.
If the pressure is dropping, that means it's intensifying.
Let us know how far it's dropped since, because guess what?
If the pressure doesn't drop, that means it's weakening.
When you're talking about the storm Lee, because a lot happens in just a short amount of time. Put it in perspective, 12 hours ago, we were talking about a Cat 1 storm. Now we're talking about a Cat 4. And look at the forecasted cone. By tomorrow evening, 165 miles per hour. Each and every time we get this forecast coming out, they not only increase the intensity of the winds, but also the acceleration of this, of how fast it will happen. We're talking about Friday night now. We're looking at 24 hours from now. This storm could be 165 miles per hour. We're no longer waiting until the weekend. Thankfully, here's the other update. Notice the forecasted cone is well north of the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico. So that's a good sign. They'll still feel impacts, but hopefully not the worst of it. There they are, leaving St. Croix. And I believe this is going to be the
heading right for me,
or the airplane there, but they're getting right into the outer bands of this. And this is going to be one that I feel like a lot of these hurricane hunters,
the hurricane hunters,
and they're going to talk about. This is the strongest storm I've ever flown through.
They go out and they fly into it, and
most likely tomorrow's when it intensifies.
And we bring back data.
Which you're looking at those flights that will be flying all through tomorrow morning as well, and they will be giving us crucial data coming back, because when you have a storm that's getting this organized and strengthening this fast, remember this is in the MDR region recently, well off in the Atlantic. Now we're going to be getting more and more data, not only coming in from the hurricane hunters well above into the storm, but also there's going to be some sail drones which are in the water, giving you in situ measurements, telling us how much this is feeding this storm as well.
Please subscribe, like, and comment. Share this out. Thank you.
That's going to be a Cat 4 to Cat 5, and this is something that we really haven't seen before. And if you ask our hurricane specialist Brian Norcross, who's been doing this for decades, he said the same. To see this kind of intensity. Again, this is where we're showing you it is moving north of the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the British Virgin Islands, but still spots like St. Martin, St. Bart, Anguilla, and even the northern side of Puerto Rico could have some tropical storm winds, really rough surf, and dangerous rip current. Here's the exclusive Fox model, and what I want you to look at here is how balanced this system is and how you'll see the entire eye wall. There it goes, and it really broadens out. So you may have some eye wall replacement cycles that will continue to happen, but either way, as we get to this spot here on Tuesday, Marissa, you have a powerful storm that now a lot of people are wondering, where does it go from here?
I mean, you leave it on that shot right there, and it looks like it's heading right towards the East Coast. So that can be some scary stuff, right? And that's what we're continuing to monitor, is when it's going to take that northward turn. That northward turn makes the difference of a landfalling hurricane and maybe one that's just impacting rough surf and giving us some rip current. So there is a lot to watch, and it's too early to really discount anything, especially when you're talking about a long-range forecast looking ahead to next week. But it is expected to make a northward turn. The question is, well, when is that going to happen? Because that could really play a huge role. If we're moving west-northwest, do we turn north here? Do we turn north here? And if we continue to move north, where does Lee go? Now, there is growing certainty that areas in through the southeast, the mid-Atlantic, and maybe even the Delmarva, we're not looking at a landfall. But you get further into the northeast, into New England area, and even the Canadian Maritimes, and we cannot rule out landfall at this point, especially even some damaging impacts. So, you know, it is certainly something to watch, because even with a massive hurricane traveling right off the coast here, it is going to most definitely bring very dangerous waters right along the eastern seaboard. And with lifeguards now, for most of the beaches, retiring for the season, you're going to have empty beaches, and my concern is folks that are trying to get in the water. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the possible low positions. So tracking the center of Lee, where that could go. Here's that model consensus that Steve was mentioning. You notice with the cone, though, the cone got broader, meaning less certainty, and you can see how the models start to take Lee in different areas. Now, a bulk of the models continue to take Lee further off to the north, and maybe position taking it into maybe Maine or the Canadian Maritimes. But you don't want to rule out even some of those outlying models at this point, just because it's too soon. It's too soon and a lot could change. You continue to see, here's Hurricane Lee, here's the subtropical high that we have. It continues to ride the southern ridge of it and the southern end of it, and it'll continue to push off to the west.
Yeah, I hate them,
as
man. They're
weakens.
not fun.
But notice as we get into early next week, that ridge starts to retreat further off to the east, kind of opens the door. You also have high pressure coming in. That's positioned to the south with that trough coming in from the west. So everything kind of working together to hopefully get Lee to turn further to the north.
That high pressure comes in before Lee
that
does.
is going to be, I think, our saving grace.
And
in
if that high
terms
pressure
of,
comes
you
in
know,
right
a
behind where
huge
Florida is,
direct
it could
threat.
block it.
But again, it's too soon to rule anything out, especially for areas further off into the northeast. We're going to be watching ocean effects, North Carolina to New England. Be alert.
We'll see what happens.
We
Things
have
can
trips
change.
planned to Bermuda, and then fringe effects in Puerto Rico that we'll be watching as well. So there's a couple of scenarios. This is scenario one, and here you can notice the Atlantic ridge is going to weaken, shift to the east, trough will dig south next week, and you get that steering to the north, and you can see some of the impacts, especially along the big
Bermuda
system.
high.
It's going to take a little bit more to really steer it away. This is scenario number two. The trough stays further north and slightly weaker, and you'll notice the movement of Lee slightly different, but all this can make a huge difference, as you know, Steve, in terms of some of the impacts that we're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, something we'll be watching for, and as you had just mentioned, the strength and intensity of a storm, that oftentimes can dictate everything. Let's talk about what's happening here stateside right now, and that's that intense heat. Baltimore dropping now into the mid-80s, so that's a good sign, and you see that nice little glow off in the distance as evening is close to us, but we will see some thunderstorms that will rumble through here as you're under a severe thunderstorm watch. And it's not just the Northeast, it's also the mid-Atlantic. So here's that severe thunderstorm watch in place from DC and Baltimore up through Philly and then Albany to Syracuse. So this is something that's going to be causing a major headache if you are still at the airports. We have ground stops at Boston, Newark, and Charlotte. And then you have that at Dulles in New York, at JFK and LaGuardia, and also in Philly. All ground stoppages, by the way. Then you have ground delays at some of those as well. And so hopefully we're kind of seeing less of the travel, right, because summer's coming to an end, but still difficult if you are at those airports. Here's why. You can see all those warnings that are coming out from this as it advances in, and those delays will be long-lived because this is just the beginning of these storms pushing into the Northeast, and most of this is going to be warned because of the wind speed up to 60 miles per hour. And most of these, this is going to be for Orange and Passaic counties there along the I-84 corridor spilling into the lower Hudson Valley.
Ooh, that's a nasty cell. Very thunderstorm warning until 7:45.
Choose your mountain, the Catskills, the Adirondacks, the Green or the White Mountains. All over here, you can get that orographic
75 inches of hail.
That rainfall, so that could lead to that flash flooding potential for tomorrow. We revisit this threat, right? Another likely threat stretching from, DC through Philly and all the way through towards Boston in those spots. So it'll be another round, and you'll see this reignition that starts with these storms yet again. So a stormy end to the week here. This is at 6 p.m. where so many people are trying to put this week behind them and get into the weekend and enjoy themselves. Just tell you, if you're going to be out on the town, be prepared. And if you have the opportunity, maybe you're having dinner outside, try to get indoors, because not only can you dodge the showers, but Marissa, as you're about to talk about, maybe you can get some of that AC as well.
I mean, the AC, it's really the only way to battle extreme heat. It's the only way to really cool down your body effectively. There are other ways to do so that's a little cheaper, but let's face it, having air conditioning, it's a privilege. New York City, 85 degrees, still hot, still steamy. By the way, it was the first day of school for New York City public schools. So you had a lot of kids that were piling into some very sticky hot situations. So hopefully everybody was able to weather the day just fine. Also happened to be the marking of our first official heat wave for the Big Apple. You need 3 days of 90 or above, consecutive 3 days, and we were able to do that in Central Park, which is with the climate station that matters here in New York City. So above 90, in fact, We are going to see a cool down for tomorrow, compliments of that cold front that's edging its way further into the northeast. You'll notice it's already knocked down some of those temperatures from Pittsburgh over to Rochester. Not quite seeing it closer to the I-95 corridor, but we will see a difference tomorrow. Not a dramatic one, but a little bit. You look at the heat index right now, and because of the fact that it is still humid out, you do still have these heat indices that are making it still feel like it's in the 90s at the very least. So heat alerts for that reason are in effect. You have the heat advisories from Philly up to New York into New Haven, Hartford, and Worcester. For New York City, averaging just about 80 degrees this time of year. Well above that is what we've had heading out of the Labor Day holiday. Notice we do start to tumble down a little bit. It's not really noticeably cooler, though, I think, until you get to next week when we bounce down into the 70s. Reason being, we have a little bit of a change in our atmospheric setup. Notice what we have right now is that ridge of high pressure to the south. That's why it's so hot. And you're even noticing how, as we head into next week, that ridge in the south, for the most part, stays. It does shift to the west, but you're still looking at the big time heat returning to the southwest, sticking around in the southern plains. But you get a little bit of relief in the east and for areas in the Great Lakes because of that troughing going down. It kind of opens the doors, allowing that cooler air from Canada to nudge its way further south.
That's a
Here's
jet
a look at the
dream.
temperature outlook. This takes you through, what, the 13th and the 17th of September. We're talking about very likely cooler, where you see areas highlighted in blue. Very likely warmer areas in orange, especially look at the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. It's been hot, it's been dry out there. And I know they could certainly use some rain, but hey, either way, if you're looking forward to the refreshing cool down, I think many of you are going to get it.
Ooh, thankfully.
Thankfully.
And we're going to jump
No,
over
which will
to
get that
quickly.
cooler weather.
Following the deadly flooding slamming Greece this week, and word tonight that hundreds of people have now been rescued. Some residents have been forced to climb onto their rooftops while awaiting that rescue. And then today, the Greek army using a bulldozer that you see here to evacuate people from the massive flooding in the center of the country. Now, those bulldozer rescues looking similar to the ones that we saw in California just last month. Take a look at this. This was in Cathedral City, California.
I don't know if that's
Hillary,
safe.
people trapped in the mud at the senior center there. Now, the bulldozers scooped them out, thankfully, and were able to save them. But it just shows you the power of these storms, and when you get too much rain at once, it's either the rushing water or the mudslides that can be oftentimes deadly. Still ahead, we're going to be tracking the powerful Hurricane Lee as it rapidly strengthens and churns in the Atlantic. The latest on Lee's path coming up.
Plus, staying healthy in the heat. We're going to talk to the experts about staying cool during this September heat wave. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I wonder who's all watching. It's not saying anything. But thanks for the views, and I need them. Please like and subscribe, thank you, and share this out.
Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
It's not that weird time. And
Because there's nothing more important to
not
than keeping you safe.
not everyone likes the weather.
Forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people.
That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
And back now on Fox Weather, it is not just the U.S. that is feeling the heat, even though the calendar says we officially made our way into September. The U.K. is baking right now as well. In fact, in England, a lot of folks heading to the parks to cool off today, to cool off any way they can. London's Trafalgar Square, especially its fountain, was a popular place to hang out in this unseasonable heat.
Obviously, like, the weather in general with everything that's been going on is concerning, but I feel like the British weather is so unpredictable. I feel like last year or the year before that, it was this hot in October. So it's British weather. I don't know if it's anything unusual compared to what else is going on around the rest of the world.
I mean, we've got unusual stuff too, so the unusual is becoming usual, and it's Trafalgar Square. It's corrected. I have yet to go to London, but I'm going to go when it's cooler. Britain's Met Office has declared a heat wave as temperatures could reach into the 90s in some cities. Britain's National Weather Service said this month has been the 8th warmest summer since 1884.
And so let's jump back over the pond, which is extremely warm as well. And let's talk about the heat that is in the U.S. We're looking right now into the hot Houston area where they're at 104 just air temperature. Now, the state of Texas actually saw its first increased power grid emergency of the summer. The alert is now lifted, but triple-digit temperatures over the next few days still have grid operators on edge.
Yeah, I can't blame them. Everybody's trying to cool off with that AC. Fox News multimedia reporter Joy Addison is in Houston with more on this alert. And Joy, it is sizzling still in Texas, especially Houston.
Well, Stephen, Marissa, that's right. It's still hot here in Texas, and this is actually the first time that we've seen this type of emergency of level 2 since the 2021 ice storm. And though grid operators said that it was prepared to weather the hot temperatures that we've seen over the past couple of months, this is actually the 10th time this summer that Texans have been asked to turn down thermostats and try to conserve energy as best possible. This started when grid operators alerted people to reduce their electricity consumption between 6 and 9 p.m. last night. ERCOT says it was asking large power users to reduce consumption and even sought help from other grids across the country. Shortly after it, ERCOT announced emergency operations to call on all available power generation to try and stay ahead of electricity demand and dwindling supply. This brought the Texas power grid to a level 2 emergency and the closest it's been all summer to a possible power outage or rolling blackouts. This means consumers would be without power during some of the hottest temperatures of the summer. Thankfully, ERCOT lifted the emergency 77 minutes after it was announced on Wednesday night once the system stabilized. While the heat wave is part of the blame, one energy expert says there's another reason too.
The fact is the state has been growing and we've not been adding to the fleet of generation that we require. The gross domestic product of Texas in 2010 was $1.25 trillion. In 2021, it was $1.99 trillion. A lot of business has moved to Texas. We have not been out in front of building electricity generation capacity in advance of economic activity.
And while we've been told here in Texas that we can go back to using our thermostats and energy as normal, it's not quite over. ERCOT says that we are under a weather watch until Friday. Back to you guys.
All right, yeah, and Joy, it does look like Houston is going to return back to maybe a little above seasonable by next week, but that's still going to be in the mid-upper 90s. Fox News multimedia reporter Joy Addison in Houston with the heat. And, a lot of concerns there, right?
Yeah, from Houston all the way here, we are feeling the heat as well. And with all of this constant heat, researchers have been figuring out how communities can stay cool. It's been a real challenge in rural areas where there's less air conditioning.
Yeah, joining us now, director of the Duke University Heat Policy Innovation Hub, Dr. Ashley Ward. Dr. Ward, appreciate you joining us. You know, across the country, we're watching how these larger cities have been able to handle prolonged heat waves. You know, you have dramatic heat, but for an extended period of time. But what is being done to help those more rural communities that may not have access to the same resources?
Well, thank you for having me, and I think that's a great question. Often we do concentrate on, the urban heat island and the impact of extreme heat in urban populations, and that's very important. However, rural populations, if you look at heat-related illness rates, actually are impacted more so than urban populations from heat, and they have available to them less interventions available to them. For example, a cooling center doesn't work so well in a rural area where you have to drive 30 miles to get to it. So it's really important in these areas that we build upon already existing networks like churches and civic organizations, Meals on Wheels, Centers for Aging, to get out information about who is vulnerable to heat,
Hey,
when they're
Mad.
vulnerable, and what they can do about it to protect themselves. I think it's important to note that heat-related illness is 100% preventable.
Yeah, it's that silent killer as well. It's a major concern. And so when we talk about AC in and of itself, it's really the primary source of what so many people do to combat these extreme heat waves. But some of these people can't run AC all day. It just costs too much to keep it running, especially with temperatures that remain high overnight. So you got to keep it running 24/7. What is being done to kind of help communities who can't afford the continuous AC use?
Yeah, this is also a great question.
Major
like the
Heat
program, which is
Major
Mad
Energy one.
program, which will help residents pay for their energy bills.
Sorry, got tongue twisted there.
But I think it's also important that we communicate with folks about what they can do to supplement their air conditioning by the strategic use of fans, for example, also by doing other individual non-air conditioned cooling interventions, like when you come in from outside, instead of cranking your air conditioning up to cool the house, the entire
today
house,
here is
take
like,
a cool shower for 5 to 10 minutes.
I think
or
it was
immerse
90
your feet above the
something.
ankles in cool water. This also is very effective at lowering your core body temperature without having to run your AC. And then I think I would also suggest that if you're one of those folks that have window air
It's just
conditioning
been way
units and
too
you can
hot
only
for me to
run
be outside.
one of them or something, prioritize your
To
bedroom.
try to get any
You can close
content.
that space off. It's usually smaller than the rest of your house, and you're going to spend a lot of time in there sleeping overnight. And it's important that it's cool when
I
you
don't know
sleep
what
so
the
that
heat
your
index
body
here
can
was.
recover
I think
from your heat exposure during the
I have
day.
to go back and look, but
Advice.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was high.
They are so simple, things you can do, right? I always keep my curtains closed. Those blackout curtains are really good at keeping some of the direct sun out of the way.
We had a storm, but it didn't get any
having an
rain.
impact on people's health. In fact, it can have a severe impact. But apparently women are also feeling some of the impacts of this heat. What are some of the biggest areas that your team is studying to really learn more about the impacts of chronic extreme heat exposure, in particular with women?
Yeah, thank you for asking. We find that pregnant women are particularly vulnerable to heat. And I think it's important to note that pregnant women are particularly vulnerable when overnight temperatures remain persistently high. My guess about this is that, when pregnant women work just like everyone else and they're exposed during the day. And when they come home
Hoping when it gets a little bit cooler,
overnight, it has a cumulative effect on
I'll
their
try to
body
go
and
on and
actually
get some
can lead to
content.
increased rates of preterm birth. And this is very important because there are all kinds of other health conditions that are related to that, both for the mom and the baby. And so I think helping women understand when they're at risk, paying attention to when temperatures overnight don't fall below 75 degrees. This is when we really see some 75 degrees and up overnight. We really see some health impacts for women. So I think, we need to pay attention to who is vulnerable, how they're vulnerable, and that helps us understand better interventions to protect them.
I can attest. I am currently 7 months pregnant, and I am still so hot at night. I am laying there like this with a fan on me. My husband's bundled up.
All right, brother. Hope I'll see you around, man. Thanks for coming, bro.
People often forget about those overnight hours.
Yeah, your body needs
Thanks
a
for
chance
coming,
to rest,
dude.
and it can't when it's always just trying to cool itself off.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashley Ward, director of the Duke University Heat Policy Innovation Hub, thank you for joining us here on Fox Weather.
Thank you so much.
And as part of the effort to never forget the lives lost on September 11th, 2001, our very own Nick Koser is taking part in this year's Tunnel to Towers 5K.
So here's Nick with more on that incredible run.
Nick, why are you running?
Got to get in shape for race day.
Race day?
Yeah, I do more than just forecast the weather and dance around here. This year, I'm proud to be joining Tunnel to Towers on their mission to do good and never forget 9/11 with their cornerstone 5K run event in New York City. Tunnel to Towers is committed to making sure America never forgets the lives lost on September 11th. On Sunday, September 24th, me and more than 30,000 others are participating in a one-of-a-kind 5K event. We'll be retracing the steps of fallen firefighter Steven Siller as he raced from the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel to the Twin Towers. Registration is open now for this year's race, so if you're in the New York area, come join me to support Tunnel to Towers' mission to honor the sacrifices made by our nation's heroes. Visit t2t.org today to sign up and donate, and I'll see you at the finish line. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some more training to do. Let's go, Nick. You got this. Only 2 more miles. Work off those donuts.
And up next, we're going to be tracking Hurricane Lee in the Atlantic. It's now a Cat 4 hurricane, and the latest on Lee's path as the hurricane hunters have now just entered in, and what they are finding into this monster of a storm. We'll have that. And which areas could see rip currents and hazardous surf? That's coming up next. And right now on Fox Weather Live, we are tracking Hurricane Lee. The Category 4 hurricane is still expected to pick up strength as it moves toward the Caribbean. Fox Weather, we're your Hurricane HQ, and we're going to be keeping a close eye on Lee and what it could do as its impact to the East Coast.
And then speaking of the East Coast, we've got a September heat wave on our hands, and it's continuing even as we head into tonight with that heat. The good news, though, is that we do have some relief on the way. The bad news is that so are some rounds of storms. It always comes at a price, but we're going to find some relief for places like New York City and Philadelphia, both that just had a heat wave.
Yeah, and we need some of that relief. We're going to be talking about those changes here. A lot has happened in the tropics as well. Thank you for joining us on your Thursday. I'm Steve Bender.
And I'm Marissa Torres, joining us on a Thursday. What a weird week. A lot of you had the long weekend. You know, last week you were here tracking Idalia. We got a little bit of a break from, for the holiday weekend, Mother Nature saying, I'll give you a second. And before he knew it, Mother Nature was throwing at us our next hurricane, major hurricane.
Yeah.
Not only that, we can't lose the fact that we also now have Margot, Tropical Storm Margot in the Atlantic.
Yeah, Margot for a one time frame was looking at, okay, they dropped their chance of development.
Margot?
And that started to pick up last night when you and I were tracking.
That's
Now
a
they're
real
talking about, hey, it's
name.
going to be another powerful hurricane.
Yeah.
Just like that. So just don't blink. A lot's going to happen here. Let's talk about what's unfolded with Hurricane Lee. In just the past 12 hours, it went from a Cat 1 to a Cat 4. Explosive growth. And right now, when you're looking at this, there's just so much that can be told there. Look at that well-defined eye that is well-balanced, by the way, not losing any of its structure at all. And you'll notice on each and every side, each and every quadrant we talk about, it is potent and it is robust. You have a solid outflow boundary that's happening too. And so when it's all said and told, and I look at this, it looks like a buzzsaw, which means nothing's stopping this or slowing it down. And all trends and signs say this will continue to strengthen. How fast, I should say, that's going to be told by us here by the Hurricane Hunters. They're just getting into this new mission. You can see
the other one, no threat
potentially through that eye wall. And that's going to be interesting to see. Also, something else is they're flying through the southwestern portion of this. When you're looking at this, that's where you're seeing that white rippling effect. That's the higher cloud tops. So they could arguably going through the worst of this storm here shortly. And we'll continue to get you those numbers that are coming in. And you can see that quick spike right there in the wind. So they've gone tropical storm force winds, and they're just getting to the outer bands. And it's gonna jump from there. I mean, all the scans that show us is that this thing is gaining intensity, and by overnight hours, this could be a Cat 5 storm. It just continues to increase so quickly. It's not the only mission. There's going to be quite a few missions here in the days to come, and they're going to tell us a lot. And you're looking at this here. There's the Hurricane Hunter schedule, and we're going to be having this going into tomorrow morning. And another aspect of this too is a company that I talked about 2 years ago, Sail Drones. They have some of those autonomous drones that are in the water, and they are going to be telling us what it is like at the surface, right? That what's feeding these storms that just continue to go through rapid intensification, like that's the norm. Remember, there is a classification. You can't just say, oh, something rapidly intensified. It has to gain and sustain winds 35 miles per hour in 24 hours. Well, it's done that and then some. And notice this, by tomorrow evening, we're looking at another round of rapid intensification because we're at 130 right now. By tomorrow evening, it could be 165. That is a top-end Cat 5 storm that is pushing through. Now, the latest cone does have it going north of the Lesser Antilles, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, but that's just the cone. With a massive system like this, its impacts are wide-reaching. And so areas like St. Martin, St. Bart, Anguilla, and even the northern side of Puerto Rico will feel its impact. Now, the hurricane force winds likely to stay north, but notice this, the tropical storm force winds are likely to impact those areas on the northern side of the Lesser Antilles, and that's going to create rough surf and very difficult conditions there. But the big question everybody's asking, Marissa, is what happens after that?
I mean, if you were to keep it on that general route that you've been showing, just moving west-northwest, well, it's heading right towards the East Coast. So we do want to talk about what the models are projecting with some northward steering and when that could potentially be. But I mean, as Steve mentioned, Lee has intensified incredibly fast, what feels like more like a double intensification. I was trying to remember when we were here last night, so 24 hours ago, you had, 75-mile-per-hour winds. It is now graduated to a Category 4. 130-mile-per-hour winds. But then look what's happening in the Eastern Pacific. You have Hurricane Hova, now really not expected to impact land, but what it is doing is showing us just how strong storms can get in the Eastern Pacific when you don't have a lot of wind shear and you have a lot of warm water. Also a Category 4, but a high-end Category 4. And the reason this is so interesting because this is the first simultaneous Category 4 hurricane situation that we've seen in the Atlantic and the East Pacific since 2004. The hope is that we can navigate both of these without any landfall to anybody. We know that Hova is going to continue to move off to the west-northwest, but you're noticing Lee, that is still one we have to watch. And as I mentioned, Margot getting a name as well. So Tropical Storm Margot, our 14th named storm of the season. The winds just at tropical storm strength, pushing past the Cabo Verde Islands. And you can see that very decent spin, that low-level center that we have. This is continuing to move off to the west-northwest, but we'll also have some northward steering to it as we see that subtropical ridge weaken and shift a little bit. That's what's going to help this turn to the north. Notice with Margot, as we head into the weekend, we're looking at potentially a hurricane as we head in towards Saturday night and strengthening even as we head in towards Tuesday. So we do want to watch Margot to hope that one stays out in the Atlantic and doesn't cause anybody any problems. When you talk about where we are in the season and what warm sea surface temperatures can do, especially above average ones, can make a huge difference. Look at what we're dealing with. Our 13th named storm of the season is Lee. Typically, we see that naming on October 25th, but we did so on September 5th with Lee. We just had our 14th named storm, that is Margot, and typically, guys, we don't see our 14th named storm until November, just before Thanksgiving. So we really have accelerated this season. You don't have a lot standing in the way of Lee. It's expected, as Steve said, to continue to intensify like Margot as we head in through the next few days. And you still have 60% of activity remaining. In fact, there's another tropical wave that we're already watching off the coast of Africa, Steve. That one's going to also require some monitoring. But you take away the wind shear, take away the dry air, you leave the warm water. That is the recipe for what we're seeing now. And it is intimidating and scary when you watch it.
Yeah, because these storms, they're not just popping up and then dissipating. They're turning very powerful and major hurricanes just like that. So we'll continue to track the tropics, and then let's talk about the immediate impacts that so many are feeling, especially in the mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. There's the White House, the Capitol, temperatures into the mid-80s, some nice relief. Notice off in the distance, though, some gray skies, and could have some storms that are pushing through. They are under a severe thunderstorm watch, and so looking at this right now, there's some of the impacts to the flights, and it's been miserable. You got a ground stop at, LaGuardia and those spots that are like JFK, Boston, Dulles, Newark. All these spots are seeing those ground delays that continue to happen here. People are rerouting in order to try to get around those thunderstorms. So misery index is a 3 out of 4, but I would argue you could probably say it's 4 out of 4 right now. Severe thunderstorm watch in place in yellow from Syracuse and Albany down through Philly, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C., impacting millions of Americans. There's that severe thunderstorm warnings that continue to pop up south near Richmond, Virginia. Then you're going into PA, into portions of western and then upstate New York. So anywhere along this line of storms with this cold front, you are witnessing those severe thunderstorm warnings. And a lot of this is coming back to the wind potential and the speed, which is up to 60 miles per hour. Here's all the storm reports that we've had in the past 3 hours alone, 95 of those in just that red box. Exclusive Fox model will show that this will be robust all the way through the early morning hours, and then by about 5 or 6 a.m., it clears out. It pushes out into Canada. Calm start to tomorrow, but then we revisit this threat all over again as we see that likely threat stretch all the way from northern Virginia through southern Maine yet again. So another potent round of storms expected, Marissa, as we close out the week.
All right, let's go ahead and take it to the southern plains. We want to move into Texas. Houston continuing to bake with some of the big-time heat. You're noticing 101 degrees right now with those clear skies. This is one of the Texas cities that's been gripped by excessive heat for months now. We want to bring in Fox 26 Houston meteorologist Ramisha Shea joining us live. Ramisha, we talked to you last night as well. That heat hasn't budged.
Oh, it's been oppressive here. We have been dealing with this record-breaking heat. In fact, another day of record high temperatures being shattered across Houston. Record highs set at Bush Airport, Hobby Airport, Galveston, and in College Station. 102 to 103 today in Houston. We need a break from this pattern. We're still under a heat advisory until 9 p.m. this evening. And it looks like we're finally going to start to see some changes. Thank goodness. We actually have, believe it or not, a risk for severe storms tomorrow. We haven't had that in a while. We need the rainfall. We desperately need a lot of rain. Our drought monitor being updated this morning, and we now have more of the area in that exceptional drought, which of course is the worst category that you could have. But we do have better rain chances. Like I said, a chance for severe storms tomorrow afternoon. And with that, of course, the threat for some heavy rain. We don't need the damaging wind gusts of 60 or 70 miles per hour. We don't need the hail, but we desperately need that rain.
Front to the north, but it just kind of stopped falling south and instead just kind of stalled, not really bringing much chance of a rain shot. And the other thing, you know, we talked about with you, you need consistent, more like persistent, evened out rain, not just in one swoop. Drought takes time to dig yourself into that hole. It takes time to get out. Any shot that you could have some good rain coming, you know, as you look at even maybe a little bit more long-term forecast?
Well, looking really into the next few days, it looks like we'll start to see a change to that weather pattern. We do have a shot for a few showers and storms tomorrow, especially between about 3 to 9 p.m. And as I mentioned, a few of those storms could be strong to severe. So we don't need the severe weather, but we need some of those heavy downpours that could come in with some of those stronger storms. Saturday, it looks like we could get a few rounds of rain, a bigger round expected in the morning. And if you miss out in the morning, you have another shot for a few more showers and storms for the afternoon. So overall, things are changing. I think tomorrow it's going to be another day of record-shattering, record-breaking heat. We're forecasting a high of 104 here in Houston. But after that, high temperatures should drop back down to the 90s, maybe middle 90s by the middle and end of next week, maybe even a few spots in the low 90s. That's unheard of, at least lately around here. So that will be nice.
It's all relative, right? I mean, we're in the 90s and we are struggling here in the Northeast. You're just hoping to get back into the 90s. All right, Fox 26 Houston meteorologist Ramisha Shade, best of luck as you inch your way to those cooler temperatures.
Thank you. We need all the luck we can get.
If I could send some cooler air, I would. Let's go ahead and take it into Philadelphia. So Philadelphia just experiencing their third heat wave of the season. It's been hot. Philly had to, you know, after launching the new school year, had to send kids home early in the schools without air conditioning, with those public schools that were, you know, worried about the impacts of heat and humidity and what it could mean for some of the kids trying to head into those classrooms. Let's talk about the temperatures right now. Still warm, especially right along the I-95 corridor. You have Trenton at 87. You have Baltimore at 84. And noticing New York dipping down now to 86. But it's been tough. In fact, it hasn't just been record highs in the Northeast. It's also been some record lows. And a lot of those were challenged earlier this morning. And we could see some also challenge as we head into tomorrow. But here's a look at the heat index. Still feels like you're in the 90-degree range as we even navigate this hour because of the humidity. Heat advisories, those are going to stay in effect through tonight. And you're noticing for New York City, well, here we average 79 in the Big Apple for this time of year. But we are going to see a return to that, I think, by next week. The cold front, unfortunately, not going to give us the dramatic change that Chicago or Minneapolis or Milwaukee had. But it is going to help shave away at some of those temperatures. And I think even dropping about 10 degrees is going to feel better. We do have a pattern change headed our way. That ridge shifts further off to the west. So it's going to keep it hot in the southwest and the southern plains, but it's going to help cool down areas in through the Northeast and the Great Lakes. Still ahead as Hurricane Lee strengthens in the Atlantic. Florida still recovering from Idalia. We're going to talk with the owners of a gym that was damaged by last week's storm, how they're making their way through the recovery. More Fox weather on the way. We'll be right back. let's go ahead and check in on Hurricane Lee as the Category 4 storm continues to move towards the Caribbean. We have to emphasize again that it is too soon to say how this could impact the U.S. East Coast, particularly, when we'll see it steer to the north, because right now, notice it does have a predominantly westward movement to it. So we're going to continue to watch it and track it out, especially for the eastern seaboard. Let's take a look at the latest stats right now. Again, a Category 4 hurricane. We got that update from the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Pressure has continued to drop all the way down to 953 millibars, and you're seeing those maximum sustained winds at 130 miles per hour. Very clearly defined eye, very intense and large hurricane that we are watching coming out of the tropical Atlantic. So here's a look at the forecast track. Not much of a change in it, but we are expected to continue to see it strengthen as it pushes west-northwest of the islands there. And all of this coming just a week after Hurricane Idalia made landfall in Florida. Fox Weather's Britta Merwin and Bob Van Dillen were on the ground covering the storm as it hit. And earlier today on Weather Command, they shared their experiences.
Since it was paralleling the coast of Florida, you really didn't know exactly where it was going to bend in, where we should be located. So we went to Tampa, and you did too, and you went up to the Big Bend area afterwards, right?
Yeah, I pretty much kind of trailed the whole storm. So started in Tampa. For landfall day, I was in Gainesville. And, after the window closed for Gainesville to feel the brunt of what they were going to feel, we started chasing the eye. And that's when we started seeing the wind impact. And, once we got to landfall site, which was actually the day after landfall, I was shocked by what I found in Keaton Beach. Shockingly, it looked okay.
Really?
I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a ton of cleanup. They had 7-foot storm surge in the area. They had 83-mile-per-hour winds. But go back to what the storm was. This was a Cat 4, 20 miles off the coast, and made landfall as a Cat 3. For a landfall of a Cat 3 to have peak wind gusts at 83 miles per hour, it would make you scratch your head until you look into what happened. And, backing up the radar, it's clear as day what happened. It was going through an eye wall replacement. Talk about perfect timing.
Exactly.
Perfect timing for an eye wall replacement, because the eye, it fell apart while it was making landfall. And that was a saving grace for the state of Florida. Imagine, what we saw in Perry. That's where we saw the strongest winds from this. It was almost like a tornado rolled through. Imagine having that widespread across the Big Bend, because that's what we could have seen if we didn't see that eye wall replacement.
Yeah, it really was the break in the storm.
And it was interesting, too. I was sleeping on how much rain actually fell. I was in Clearwater Beach, and I was getting pounded for most of the evening into the overnight hours. And then I looked at the rainfall totals. Clearwater Beach,
All right,
9.5 inches of rain. So we had some freshwater flooding going on as well as that storm surge that came up. There's a video of the storm surge right here. That was when it was just starting. It actually got a little bit worse. Got up to about 4 feet, which covered the entire street right there. It was Gulfview Boulevard, and then it went out through Coronado Drive, which is right next to it, parallels the beach. Our hotel was an island for a good 6-8 hours there. It wasn't that deep. It was about maybe a foot at the most, but we was still in there. That 4-foot surge. Imagine if that storm was closer inland and it was stronger. You can imagine how vulnerable this area is when it comes to storm surge. And that was kind of just a weak storm surge if you look at it, 4 feet, but look what it did.
Right. And I think this is a wake-up call and a reminder at the same time for people who have not seen a storm come through the Big Bend, and also those who've moved to Florida because there's been such an influx of population, to see both water damage and wind damage that can come out of a storm like this.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example for folks that don't live in Florida, because Florida knows how to deal with tropical systems. You can see it in their building codes. I mean, in Keaton Beach, I've never seen homes that are built up that high.
Well,
I mean,
18 to 20 feet off the ground.
Higher than that in Keaton Beach, though. I was shocked. They had some pilings that were 25 feet tall.
Wow.
And we looked into the building codes. The building code is they need 36 feet from the bottom to the top of their home. And the reason why is because the storm of the century in 1993. So although the Big Bend of Florida has not been impacted by a hurricane in over, 100 years, March of 1993, a non-tropical system brought in a 7-foot storm surge for places like Keaton Beach and Cedar Key, and it changed the building codes. And also it changed how people act. I didn't find one resident in Keaton Beach that stayed behind.
No,
all of them left.
It's good.
And all of them, when they came back, they were so thankful that they had a home that needed repair and a lot of cleanup. there was only a handful of structures that quite honestly were going to be a rebuild. But considering that this is a Cat 3, the fact that we're talking about a handful of people that are doing a rebuild and the majority of people doing a massive cleanup and a massive repair job is, that's a huge thing to be thankful for.
It's also amazing that 93 storm turned into a nor'easter. And I remember I was playing
everyone
hockey
in
in
the
Johnstown, got
Northeast,
snowed in there for
everyone
a
in the
couple extra
Northeast
days.
knows that storm.
Yeah, so it doesn't take a hurricane just to get a storm surge. You can have any kind of storm that does it. But that nor'easter was so powerful, and it did more damage to Clearwater Beach than this storm did right now, because they built up. They put dunes out there, which is good.
Yeah, well, terrific coverage, you guys. It was an iconic storm to be a part of, and also a learning opportunity for both sides, both our teams and also people living on this coastline to see what a storm like this can do, and in a unique hurricane season at that. So great job to everyone.
Okay. And now we're going to be talking about Perry, Florida, which was in the direct path of Hurricane Idalia. It took that western eye wall, and a local gym was badly damaged when the storm hit.
So joining us now is the owner of Concur Fitness Gym in Perry. We have Dustin Whitten and office manager Amanda Gaddis. We appreciate you both joining us. And I love the name of the gym, Concur, H-E-R, female empowerment. I'm digging it. But we are just so sorry for everything you've had to deal with. I want to talk about your business, how you've been able to recover and move forward in the wake of Idalia, and really what you suffered as a result of this storm.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us to talk to you all. And I'll be honest, we're still kind of processing some of the damage, and we're still kind of mitigating it. I don't know that we're 100% in recovery mode yet, but we're definitely working that way. We've got a lot of people on the ground here helping us, a lot of resources here helping us, but the community really has banded together and kind of circled around the people that need the help. And so it's been a really cool thing to witness firsthand.
And Dustin, we saw that your gym, Concur Fitness, suffered that major damage to the structure and contents inside the floor, which you plan to live in. And I think your backstory is amazing as well. You actually built this gym. So can you kind of describe the damage that you've seen? And is this something that you feel confident that you can repair?
I left my job a few years ago and I bought the building. It's a historic building in my hometown, and it really spoke to me. It's an awesome piece of the community here, and fitness has always been a passion of mine, and I felt confident in being able to run a gym and have a nice low-cost option as a gym here in my hometown. And so as we go forward trying to rebuild, I feel like I'm confident to some degree, but it is definite. It was already an ambitious undertaking, and it definitely is now. So I do feel confident that we will get there. We'll get back up and running, but I would be lying if I said that this wasn't a setback.
Well, and I want to ask too, because we were told that the gym opened in 2019. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, you opened in 2019, the pandemic hits. So now you have that challenge, you reopen, things are getting back on track, and now you have to deal with a hurricane. I mean, this must be incredibly frustrating when you want to be there for your community and provide business and employment and an area for fun, and then you have to go through all of this.
Sure. Maybe a slight amendment on the dates, but I purchased the building in 2019, and then I actually became the gym's landlord. And then when COVID closed it down, I purchased the gym, and I just started growing it aggressively. I felt that I was capable to do that, and it's something I'm passionate about. And so my office manager Amanda here, we started aggressively trying to grow it, and we've got amazing members, and we've been very fortunate. And we've been growing the gym steadily ever since. So so the gym date was February 1st of 2021.
Amazing what you were able to accomplish. And we believe you're going to bounce on your feet, as you had mentioned. And we're running short on time. We apologize. Marine veteran and owner Dustin Whitten and office manager Amanda Gaddis of Concur Fitness in Perry, Florida. Thank you so much for sharing your story here on Fox Weather.
Thank you both.
For having us.
Yeah, best of luck moving forward. We do want to get back to some of the forecasts, so we're going to take it back into the Midwest. We have a look into Milwaukee, some of the clouds overhead. Big change from yesterday, Milwaukee. You were baking in the heat and the humidity. Then some storms went through. The cold front went through. I got a little taste of fall. So some changes for you. Green Bay, Wisconsin, Labor Day, you were sitting at 91 degrees. Today, 63. You averaged 75. So, yeah, it's a little refreshing. So that cold front doing some folks a big favor, bringing down some of those temperatures, maybe bringing you back down to seasonable. And you'll notice for tomorrow, we're also looking at some temperatures in the 70s and 80s. But, I mean, looking at Detroit, 69 degrees. Same with Chicago. You're feeling a little bit cooler. Traverse City, you also have some nice temperatures on the way.
And so we're going to be talking about those changes here stateside and also what's happening in the tropics. Make sure you stay with us here for Fox Weather.
Right now on Fox Weather Live, Hurricane Lee, it is lurking in the Atlantic. Lee is now a major Category 4 hurricane, and it is forecasted to reach Category 5 strength. I mean, maybe even by tomorrow morning, as early as that, or as late as that. So the question is, where is this monster storm headed, and when will it impact the East Coast? Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ. We've got you covered.
Plus, the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic on alert for severe storms tonight. Millions are in the path of this system. The main threats, damaging wind, torrential rain, and flash flooding. We've got your hour-by-hour forecast ahead.
And summer heat, it refuses to let up in the Northeast as well as the South. Dangerous temperatures stretching from Texas all the way into Maine. When to expect some relief, some good relief from that heat. We'll talk about that. But D.C., of course, one of those areas where it's been hot and also incredibly humid. Just D.C. in the summer, I guess. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marissa Torres.
And I'm Steve Benner. Thank you for watching Fox Weather. We also have Fox News Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichermuth with us tonight as well. We're going to dive into some of these big topics. So it's going to be great to have your insight on this because we're watching a historic storm really start to form in front of our eyes.
Hurricane hunters are in there right now and finding some really interesting stuff that we'll talk about what they're finding. But a storm like we haven't seen certainly in a really long time, maybe if ever.
You just touched upon it. I want to ask you, would you want to be on that flight?
Yeah, probably.
You would?
Although I get super nauseous and I would hate it for that. But to be on it, to have that experience.
I would love to go with them, but I don't know if I'd want to go for potentially a Cat 5 storm. Even with Hurricane Ian, when the hunters were out there, they talked about getting motion sickness.
Yeah, of course.
So
you can't right now.
Obviously, right now we have.
Marissa, we're gonna have to say
it would be labor-inducing. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about what they're finding right now. They made that first pass through, and we were talking about, okay, when is it going to turn into a Cat 5, right? That's the conversation. Is it going to be a Cat 5? When? And there's a strong case that it is already a bona fide Cat 5 storm with what you're seeing with the analysis, or you can just do the eye test. look at that right there. I keep calling it a buzzsaw because a buzzsaw just churns through everything. But you're looking at that eye. It's been well defined for hours right now. You have each and every quadrant completely filled out, and you have a nice little outflow boundary from this. This is a well-defined storm. The latest advisory came out at 5 p.m. And when you're talking about Hurricane Lee, that might as well have been a decade ago because this storm evolves each and every minute, it seems. But even with that latest advisory, you're looking at this dropping 30 millibars, which is impressive. Then you have the winds that went up to 130. That's what put it at its Cat 4 status. So it is important to note that we are having the 6-hour windows between each and every advisory because we don't have any watches or warnings to land right now. So we do have to wait till that 11 p.m. advisory, unless what they see out of the hurricane hunters, they come out with a special advisory. Time will tell, but you can see how quickly this started to enhance. Rapid intensification and then some out of Hurricane Lee. So this is the trajectory and the movement. We look out at the models here and the track. Notice how tight this is. So strong confidence through most of the weekend. And again, with that newest update that we had this at 165 now. That's an uptick on what we had seen previously. Earlier today, we had 160. Now they're saying 165. Some of the winds that are coming in out of there, we could be seeing even north of that. What this is showing us is that each and every time we push out something with a forecast with Hurricane Lee, it outpaces the forecast. Just shows you how potent this storm is. There's that first flight through with the hurricane hunters. They left from St. Croix, took about 2.5 hours to get to there. And then you're looking at this, and it's tough to tell, right? There's so many different colors. So we're going to do this, and we're going to zoom in and show you as they got through that western eye wall. That is where they had those light ones come up, right? And that's where they had those lighter and brighter colors come in, and it just showed you it maxing out. Sometimes these are just the easier ones to tell than trying to find the different colors. Look how it spikes. Almost seems like a heartbeat here, where it just spikes up so quickly off of the charts of Cat 3 plus. It's because we already know it's at a Cat 4 status, and we're looking at a strong likelihood that if it's not already determined as a Cat 5, that at the 11 p.m. advisory, it will be distinguished as a Cat 5 storm. We're going to continue to get this crucial data in from the hurricane hunters, not only through the evening time tonight, but into tomorrow morning. They have several missions that will be continuing to fly in, and all the model guidance is that they're in alignment. This will be a Cat 4 to Cat 5 storm. Something that a lot of us here at Fox Weather, even our hurricane specialist Brian Norcross, had said he's really never seen before, where they're all in agreement that this will happen. Thankfully, because of that budge to the north, you'll see the cone is north of those islands there in the Lesser Antilles, like St. Martin, St. Bart, Anguilla. And that doesn't mean they're going to be spared some of the impacts. That just means the center of the storm will be north. But we know some of the winds, especially tropical storm force winds, stretches hundreds of miles from outside of that eye, and they will feel the impacts from these from Hurricane Lee. But Marissa, I'll leave it with you, because as we pull out the exclusive Fox model, the concern is it keeps moving west, west, west. What happens as it passes those areas and we get into early to middle of next week?
I mean, the fact of the matter is, if it continues to move west, northwest on that exact trajectory, we'd have big problems for the eastern seaboard. But as we continue to, watch it into next week with the long range forecasting here, it is expected to take a northward turn. That's going to be our saving grace, is steering it away from the eastern seaboard. The question is, where will that northward turn be? And that's why we've laid this out. You talk about some of the forecast confidence. It is relatively high that we're going to see the southeast, places like Florida, in through the mid-Atlantic, that should be okay and able to dodge a direct landfall here. But as you get further to the north, into portions of the Northeast, New England, we're talking about, can't rule it out. It's just too soon. I mean, we're talking about 7 to 10 days out that we're looking at maybe those impacts going further off into the northern part of the U.S. So we'll be looking at the potential for everything from, if you felt, the tropical storm force winds, even if Lee stays further out to sea. We're talking about, will those winds make it inland? We're talking about dangerous surf. We're talking about life-threatening rip currents that all could be a part of this scenario. So it's not like we'd be completely clear even if there's no landfall. But of course, we don't want a direct landfall with a giant monster storm such as this. So here's a look at the potential track, right? You have all the models kind of really in consensus where they're all clumped together, but then they start to branch out. So again, it's where we see that turn to the north and where we see the center of Lee go. With a storm of this size, that's one of the things we're going to get from the hurricane hunters is how far reaching those hurricane force winds are, how far reaching those tropical storm force winds are. Depending on where the center tracks will play a big role in terms of what you're feeling on the eastern seaboard. A couple of things at play that we're watching here. You have that subtropical ridge there, that high pressure to the north Lee. That's going to weaken a little bit over the next couple of days as Lee continues to ride the southern edge of it. Now, with that, it will slow Lee down a little bit as this ridge weakens. As we get further into next week, though, the ridge retreats a little bit further back to the east. You also have that trough coming in, that cold front coming in from the west. That's going to play a role, hopefully, in terms of pushing Lee further out as that high pressure retreats and also allows Lee some movement to also go back to the east. So there's a lot of things at play, including the intensity of Lee, how strong of a storm this is, and if it's able to overcome some of those steering mechanisms. You look at, what we're going to be watching in terms of the ocean impacts from North Carolina through New England, so right along the coast. Dangerous conditions at the East Coast beaches, and with the lack of lifeguards, you just don't want to be getting into the water. Stay alert in Bermuda for sure, and then fringe effects that we'll be watching in places like Puerto Rico.
Well, yeah, if anyone tells you they know where Lee is going, they're wrong. Nobody knows exactly what's happening. One thing that I think is happening, at least in social media, there are a lot of armchair meteorologists who love to say exciting things. They get lots of clicks. They make money by getting those clicks, which encourages them to continue to do that behavior because people like to clickbait on these things. We don't know to a certain point. When you look at the storm right now and you see that trajectory of it, you think, oh, it's going straight towards Florida, maybe the Georgia coastline. We are confident that is not going to be the case. We are confident that there's going to be a more northerly trajectory of this storm. So if you hear people saying that, ignore them fully. There's a couple things we don't know, though, and that is exactly where that northerly track turns and if there is more of a direct impact across parts of the Northeast. So this right now is the scenario that we are a little bit more confident in, and that is that this high pressure to the north breaks down a little bit, and we start to see it make this northerly turn and eventually make a northeasterly jog, stays fully away from the land, that is at least fully away from any kind of direct impacts. You get all that ocean wave energy towards the coast, but not the rain, not really the wind, and certainly not any storm surge or anything like that. The other possible scenario from this is that that ridge, timing-wise, that trough that's coming in from the west, timing-wise, doesn't get there as fast, and it digs in a little bit deeper, and that we see that trough and the jet stream go farther towards the north. That potentially pulls us a little bit closer towards the northeastern seaboard. Certainly, we would maybe be seeing some wind from it, maybe a few showers from it, maybe some more direct impact across part of the Canadian Maritimes. This here is around 8 to 10 days from now. It is a very long time away. So plenty of time to watch this. Anybody who says they know, they don't. It is far too in advance to say exactly where this is going. No meteorologist who is worth anything would tell you exactly where the storm is going to go at that point. And so it's just important to keep checking back, not buy into that hype when you see that. What we do know is this storm is doing incredible things right now. And in fact, as they're flying in and out of there, they're starting to get some measurements. We will see if they verify, but some of the preliminary measurements that they're getting out of here are winds into that Category 5 strength. Again, we don't know if those will verify. They'll let us know the second that they are confident of that. They have measured air temperature at about 10,000 feet of 80 degrees. And I say this because we talk about tropical systems as warm core. The center of the storm is warm. There is no cold front attached to it. They are generally, though, not that warm that far up. Higher up you go, it becomes colder. When you go 10,000 feet up and there's an air temperature of 80 degrees, you are talking about a storm that is phenomenally strong and a storm that we are seeing all of it strengthening, continue to strengthen. And what we're going to see, certainly at the 11 o'clock advisory, is I think can be pretty shocking to go from how many hours ago was it still a tropical storm? yesterday at some point.
In 3 days, we've gone from a depression to a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane in a day, and then coming in today, now we have a Category 4.
So it's a phenomenally impressive storm at this point.
I think it's important what this you have right there, that list that was on there. Wilma, you're looking at pressure, that's going to be the strongest storms. And what you had talked about too with that heat, that is more indicative of these powerful Cat 5s. And Wilma was one of those ones that had a similar air temperature to what they're experiencing right now. And that was when Wilma was at its height. And again, we're reminding you that this is a storm that is strengthening, that is still expected to continue to strengthen over the next 24, if not 36 hours. And so what's alarming is that it's already very in line with what we're seeing as some of the most potent storms ever recorded, and yet it still has time to get stronger.
Yeah, I think one other thing that could happen over time with this, because we're talking many days away from a closer to the U.S. kind of impact.
Right.
It likely a strong storm like this could go through an eyewall replacement cycle or two.
Yes.
And as that happens, that wind field expands. And so right now, what is our hurricane force winds extending out? And to be honest, I'm not sure exactly how far they extend out from the center. I don't know from
Well, it's tough because the latest advisory is so old by now too.
Right. Also, and it will continue to expand, and those hurricane force winds will become larger over time if this storm does go through an eyewall replacement cycle or two, which is very possible over the next, likely over the next number of days.
Sam, just talked about that point. Can we pull up that air reconnaissance mission with the hurricane hunters, and we can kind of see how large the eyewall is? Because what you were talking about, I was noticing the eyewall well defined, right? But it started to broaden out a little bit, and it looks like, yes, we'll eventually go through a replacement cycle, but it almost looks like it's about 25 to 30 miles wide already, and it's set to get bigger once it gets through those replacements. So here's that first scan or a flight that they went through, and then we'll take out the measuring tool, and so roughly 23 miles wide, and that's without the replacement. So it just shows you again another powerful, I mean, these are all just tools just showing you what we are telling you, that this is a powerful system.
I think that's what makes it so intimidating. You talked about, people getting online and instilling fear, but you're feeding off of the fear. You had Florida that just went through Idalia, Florida that went through Hurricane Ian, which they later found did hit Category 5 strength before falling back to a Category 4 when it made landfall. It's still an incredibly strong storm. Yeah. So you see something like this barreling towards the East Coast, it's intimidating. And I think what we can't get lost on is the fact that even without a landfall for the U.S., I mean, the water is going to be rough. We just got through a holiday weekend where several people lost their lives because of
Franklin and Idalia,
right? Other
which
tropical
have been
systems
impacting that coast. So we've got another storm that's going to have big coastal impacts across the beaches for sure.
Exactly. So people need to watch this one. Certainly, we will be paying close attention to.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. And the other hot topic right now is what's happening in the South and really in Texas. It's been unprecedented. They've been setting heat records for the past few days. And we're going to be talking about how the Lone Star State, they're going to be seeing the triple-digit temperatures continue. And that could cause rolling blackouts on the already overtaxed power grid. Fox News multimedia reporter Joy Addison joins us to explain why the grid operators are on edge. Joy, let's talk about this record heat. I think it's the longevity of this as well, which is just so taxing for the power grid.
Saying that there are several reasons that we're seeing some faults in our power grid. The last time that we saw the type of emergency we had yesterday was during the 2021 ice storm. And though grid operators assured Texans that it could withstand the high temperatures that we've had during the most recent heat wave, yesterday we were asked to turn down our thermostats and conserve as much energy as possible. It all started when grid operators alerted people to reduce their electricity consumption during 6 and 9 p.m. last night. ERCOT says it was asking large power users to reduce consumption and sought help in other states across the country. Shortly after, ERCOT announced emergency operations to call on all available power generation to try to stay ahead of electricity demand and dwindling supply. This brought the Texas power grid to a level 2 emergency and the closest it's been summer to possible power outages or rolling blackouts. This means consumers would be without power during some of the hottest temperatures of the summer. Thankfully, ERCOT lifted the emergency 77 minutes after Wednesday night's announcement once the system stabilized. While the heat wave is part of the blame, one energy expert says there is another reason too.
The fact is, the state has been growing, and we've not been adding to the fleet of generation that we require. The gross domestic product of Texas in 2010 was $1.25 trillion. In 2021, it was $1.99 trillion. A lot of business has moved to Texas. We have not been out in front of building electricity generation capacity in advance of economic activity.
And though this was the first level 2 emergency alert, this is actually the 10th time that here in Texas we've been asked to conserve energy this summer. And it seems like we're not quite out of the woods yet because we are under a weather alert, according to ERCOT, until Friday due to extreme temperatures headed our way close to the weekend. Steve, back to you.
Yeah, every cold front, Joy, that gets down south just stalls out and doesn't really provide any relief to Texas. Fall just can't come soon enough. Fox News multimedia reporter Joy Addison, thank you for that report.
Severe weather that's going to be targeting the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic as a cold front works to douse the heat. We are tracking it all when Fox Weather Live returns.
Back room. Probably going to end it here soon. Well, I'm going to go because I got to eat dinner. And thanks for coming. Nightmare as always. Night Mag 1, thanks for coming, bro. And everyone have a good night. And hope to see you around soon. Bye.